This podcast and every other podcast that I make is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. They get episodes early, unedited, and ad-free. If you'd like to support, check the link in the description. I wanted to talk about Game of the Year stuff, knowing that, like, we're always really bad at this. I did ask Troy for his input, and he listed The Bear and Baldur's Gate 3, which I felt were very good picks.
The Bear in Baldur's Gate 3? Or
that too. He was referring to them separately, but why not both?
I like that.
Have you guys seen The Bear?
No, but Troy has also recommended it to me. I will get to it, I promise, eventually.
It is very good.
It's just, for me, it's one of those ones of, like, after a long, stressful day of running a kitchen / game company, it really worries me, like, going and, I don't know, I just want to watch, like, daft stuff at the end of the day.
It's very, warming, though. You're, like, you watch, you know, these people in their kitchen, these little artists and level designers in their kitchen, really blossom. And it's really,
I do have one
really
guy
fun.
who works for me. One guy who works for me used to work in the kitchen, and he does occasionally say "yes, chef" to me, and it makes me happier than anything else that happens.
That's
to me
really good.
I love it. I love it.
Also, apologies.
It's usually when I've said something stupid. Go on.
My audio's not working properly, so you guys, sorry if there's a slight echo. I keep having audio problems. That's my game of the year. When my audio works.
Audio problems. Yeah.
But yeah, what are either of you picked? I do feel like before we even go into games we liked this year, which there are a bunch that I want to give a shout out to, we have to address the egregious amount of layoffs this year. I feel like it's really difficult to talk about, wow, it's been such a good year for gaming, when it's also been simultaneously like one of the worst years for the industry in recorded history. Obviously we want to celebrate the games that even the people who get laid off made very well, but damn, 10,000 or so I think we're at in terms of layoffs this year.
And it keeps going up, right? There was a few more at Codemasters, sorry. I'm talking to an international audience. Codemasters.
That's what you call it?
Codemasters called Cody's by British people.
Wow.
Which is something I've never said in front of an American.
Wow.
And I'm realizing...
I would have not known what you were talking about.
Nope.
Yeah. That's fun. That's a fun little cultural exchange. Cody's. Up in Lem. Yeah, no, it sucks. And as well, like, I find it interesting that I think those two things might be related. The fact that we have had some, you know, a lot of big games with big investment and also a lot of layoffs. Those two things, it's worth drawing that link for the audience, I think, as well, because it's something that doesn't get talked about much.
How do you elaborate?
Okay. So during COVID, lots of people stayed home, which meant the games made a lot more money, which means that a lot of investments were made into future games, because the one thing about capitalism is the number always goes up, right? So these people who are staying home, they're always going to be home playing and buying games. So this new marketplace, this is what we're dealing with.
True. Cannot go down. Number only go up.
The number can't go down. The number only goes up. So once the number did go down, when everyone or a lot of people went back to their day-to-day lives and kind of stopped spending as much money on home entertainment, that did leave this kind of big gulf, and a lot of companies basically overextended themselves and put themselves in a position where they couldn't kind of keep going at the scale that they'd grown to. And it can happen to any company, obviously, under different circumstances, but I do think the fact that a lot of ambitious and expensive games have come out, and the fact that a lot of people then couldn't sustain the jobs that they'd created, you know, they had to kind of lay those people off. Those two things are related. It's not a positive or a negative. It's obviously a negative, the people being laid off, but I do think that those two things, there is an economic link between the two.
Interesting. You know? I had assumed it was more preemptive, in that, I don't know, the economic people are
that doesn't help.
Forecasting economics bad, and that
numbers go down.
They are forecasting scale. Numbers go down.
That's true as well. That's also a factor for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
that's for sure a factor as well.
COVID was huge for video games in such a bizarre way, you know, like the ways in which COVID was a massive success for certain industries is very unsettling. Obviously pharma, but when isn't pharma popping off? Number do only go up. until somebody goes to jail.
People be coughing. Yeah, no, it is a yeah, no, there's definitely that link, and I think the mistake that was made was a lot of business people didn't really think about the fact that that bubble might not last forever, and then when it didn't, a lot of people had to make adjustments. But yeah, have we suitably put a cloud over this? I think we have, haven't we?
But we have to. It has to be done initially, I think.
So.
And also, I'd like to ask a follow-up question to either of you. How do we feel about the current notion that it takes a minimum of 5 years? It's now people are projecting 5 to 10 to make a AAA game. That model seems unsustainable to me, but I feel like it is being sustained.
Well, don't the layoffs demonstrate the opposite?
Define sustainable, I suppose. That's the thing, is if you're thinking on a human level, then no.
Though that is how I'm
if
thinking.
You're thinking
of it. Is like,
yeah, then no.
Even that, what does that mean? And in some people's careers, they'll only have like, you can quantify the amount of games that you'll ship at this point, because you're only on life for so long. And I think, and
if your game doesn't get cancelled, of course, which,
right,
can happen.
Part of it that gets me with that is like 5 to 10 years to retain staff is part of what makes that so, like, video game budgets so exponentially more expensive. You cannot retain people for 5 years. Like, the average video game industry job is 3 years. But 5 to 10 is even if people have to move, like, there's so many reasons you can't keep talent for that long. And for every person you lose and you have to rehire and backfill, that's extremely costly because you can't even use them for months because they have to be caught up. Like, it's just 5 to 10 years is such an expense in terms of the amount of people you will lose in that period of time. And it again, especially when things can and do get canceled or tech outdates you, or like, the thing that I keep thinking of is, if you're working on something for 5 to 10 years, what if something that comes out that's exactly like what you were working on? And you're like, oh, fuck. Like, I feel like when the time's longer, that is so much more likely to happen that someone else makes all of your creative efforts redundant, especially considering the output the games industry actually has at this point. How many games have we got on Steam at this point? It's like we're in the thousands.
Or they leapfrog you, right? Or something comes out that absolutely redefines the genre, and you're 2 years out from. I think a lot of studios have found themselves in that position with the not the looter shooter, I always forget the name of the new one. The one that the hyenas was. What's the genre of hyenas?
Of what?
Was it Hyenas? The game that got cancelled that was in development for a while.
Oh, I don't know.
Recently.
I missed so much news now. I mean, a battle royale is the big.
No, there's someone. It's being posted in the comments like 20 times as we speak. There's a specific genre of shooter that's been that basically shooter? Is. Say again? No, not Hero Shooter. The one that came after that. This is embarrassing.
The genre of shooter. Okay, Hyenas is a planned science fiction first-person shooter developed by Creative Assembly and Public. I hadn't even heard of this, I don't think.
Okay, so that one was a big. There was a lot of people working
citing
on that.
Low potential for profitability. It was a PvPvE. Right, okay. Is that what you mean, PvPvE?
There's a specific term that I'm thinking that's going to be all over the comments. We'll learn it when this comes out. It's fine. but my point is, that's a genre. There are genres that can kind of bubble up and disappear in this window, as you say.
True.
You can be convinced that, like, a specific genre is about to pop off. Look, for a broader example is games as a service, right? Most of the games as a service that are coming out soon or around now. I'm thinking of like Justice League, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Like, when they started that project, they wouldn't have known the enormous kind of public opinion shifting that has happened around that genre. And yeah, it's a
great example
gamble.
of a 5-year dev cycle. They've probably been on that for 5 years at this point. How are you supposed to know?
More, yeah.
And
that's
a
challenge. And then that costs money because you have to shift genre, you have to change what your game is. And the audience then plays the game and goes, well, this seems like it was meant to be something else, and often they're right?
Yeah,
it's a massive issue, and it's one that it's tough to see a path out of, because the production value that's expected of that genre of AAA games in general is just absurd, and it does require an enormous amount of work to get that stuff done.
Austin, do you have any opinion on 5 year cycle? I imagine that makes your job harder as well, right? Like, how do you?
Actually, I would argue the opposite. I'm the minimum. I should say the average that I'm involved in games is 3 years, but there have been a few that pushed into the 4 and 5 year
3 years?
on average.
Oh wow,
Because I'm
that's longer
typically
than I
involved for
expected.
the entirety of it, and that's about been the average
Wow.
of because there's even on bigger games that have themselves longer than 3 year period. There's still often like I remember on Syndicate, for example, they had spent the first like year and a half just building London. And so there
Yeah.
was nothing really for me to do. The script wasn't finished, the actors hadn't been recorded or mocapped yet or anything. It was purely tech investment for the first, like in design investment, upfront costs.
Pre-production could be up to a couple of years as well in a lot of cases, and they're not going to call you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I love to be involved super early, but sometimes I'm kind of involved and mostly just kind of like looking over the fence on Slack and saying hi, and I'm not really actively doing much yet. But 3 years tends to be about the average for productive involvement. So
Wow.
because I'm a freelancer, it's like very few games until you reach the end of the process have like 40 hours a week worth of need of me. So it's pretty easy to have multiple projects going at once because they all have milestones that are kind of naturally just different. So I can focus on game A for the next 6 weeks and check in and make smaller amounts of progress on game B and game C. And then right as we deliver a big milestone, that one will cool off for a little while and B is now the focus for a while. And that tends to be how it goes. Now, that can get tricky because every now and again, things will then pile on top of each other and they're not even aware of one another. And I can't even really make them aware of each other without breaking my NDA with each of them. So I have to just muscle through it. It's one of those interesting, like on the subject of crunch, I know I'm a tangent off of your actual question, but I did a talk a few years ago at GDC with some colleagues about this like freelancer crunch thing that happens in that exact situation where you are being forced to double time it through projects that are overlapping that can't even know about each other. And there's nothing you can do about that.
Literally nothing you can do about it, yeah.
Yeah, the only way that you could ever possibly prevent that is by just doing less work than you can handle, which most people can't afford to do. Most people wouldn't voluntarily just work less than needed, especially because, as Mike mentioned a second ago, sometimes I've worked on games for years that then got canceled, and that sort of thing, and if I was just sort of like putting all my eggs in that basket as a freelancer, where there is no severance pay or any of that kind of stuff, generally speaking, you better have a lot of nest egg basically to weather that storm. And it's also just, even if you do have a large nest egg, it's just sort of foolish. It's a self-inflicted wound essentially. So all that said, I see it as this is driven by the market fundamentally and players' taste. And it does seem that players are increasingly not demanding bigger of everything. The market, if nothing else, has diversified where there is room for other games. And so, Rockstar is going to be able to spend like $1 billion on a game that they release every 10 years and that people will be there for it. But like the EAs, the Ubisofts, the Sonys can potentially start to kind of make games that are smaller. And I mean, look at the success of Call of Duty. Those single player campaigns have effectively ignored the trend for bigger. It's like they've held to this like 5 hours for the single player, because obviously the multiplayer is sort of what's probably floating financially those games, and they know that. So they've kind of managed to dodge a lot of the arms race, I feel like, in a savvy way. Because for me personally, and I know I'm not alone in this way, it's so satisfying in its conciseness.
Dramatically prefer it.
I love it.
Whenever I boot up a game and I could talk about this forever, 10 hours, I'm like, oh, thank God. But I don't know.
I get really annoyed if a game dares to be longer. But I think it goes even further than what Austin's saying. That's a trend that's really happened in the last few years. Is it used to be the argument was, if you're a big company with lots of money to invest, making a big bet is going to have a big reward, so therefore is a better use of your money than lots of small bets. And that was something that I had to kind of enter the industry and start like pitching indie games to kind of get that was the thinking that, oh, just give us a couple of million. It's going to be worth your time. And you make a bunch of bets and it's like, no, I'd better off putting all my money into a 20 million game and potentially doing better. That is no longer true. Like if you look at the games that have really hit and had like gargantuan success in the last 2 or 3 years, it's small games. It's consistently small games. It's consistently, or like double A kind of scale.
Yeah, well, like I guess I wouldn't know like percentage based profits. I think the highest selling game this year, or one of them, was Hogwarts Legacy, which would have been massively expensive, I would imagine.
But that probably made nothing compared to the most successful mobile game.
I think Genshin Impact has probably been tremendously successful. Does that count as double A? I
don't know. Probably not.
Probably not.
But it does feel like it's shifting, because it used to be that the only games that made money were the games that were big budget.
People only have so much
games,
time, right?
shifted.
Like that's the thing, and I know that that's the part of why so many of the business folks have shifted towards live service games and have been trying to do that so much for the last 10 years, is that like if people will only buy a certain amount of games and only play a certain amount of games, what you're actually trying to buy is people's time. If you make it live service,
then you have a top heavy ecosystem. Your carnivores have gone too big. That's the problem. Is if you're in a situation where everyone's trying to own your free, they're not trying to make a game that entertains you for 10 hours. They're trying to own the free time of a person.
Which everything is, right? Every app's trying to do that too.
That's every time the apex predators have gone too big in an environment and the environment's collapsed, because you can only eat so much. So it's
That's certainly the intent there, though, is like live service games and then monetize the hours you play through obviously different monetization strategies. That I always bring this up, but there was an Activision, I guess Active Blizzard, investor presentation where they were talking about wishing that video games could monetize the same hourly rate that films do. They're like, okay, well, if it's $16 an hour and someone plays Call of Duty for 100 hours, why aren't we getting the same return as a cinema does? Even though obviously the product is entirely different, and I don't know that that will work out well for them, but it gives you an idea of how the business people think in terms of monetizing player hours, not just selling a game and letting you play it for 10 hours, which again, I miss all the time. But every time I started Alan Wake yesterday, the remastered version, just to look at it, and was like, this is only going to take me 8 hours to finish? Is this heaven? Oh my God.
Feels like a luxury good at that point. And it may well be that that's where this ends up, that you're gonna play those kind of games and they're gonna feel like kind of connoisseur, kind of artisan shit, rather than like the mainstream. The mainstream might completely depart from even Call of Duty, most recent one of those, had kind of an underwhelming single player campaign, right? They're clearly
it was their
investing
first
less in that component.
Real dud, I think. Unfortunately.
So even that stalwart maybe is losing interest in the single player, which would be a shame, because I fucking love the Call of Duty campaigns.
But haven't people? I mean, people have been claiming the death of single player for so long, and then like look at the biggest games this year. I mean, Baldur's Gate is an interesting one because that's not technically single player, but
single player ish.
But it's like it is, and it's also one of those where
it's a single player like.
It's single player in its sort of ethos in terms of when we talk about multiplayer and you talk about more like esport kind of games or things that are closer to that, single instance, kind of much closer to sports analogies. That's what dominates the notion of multiplayer, or like RPG, MMO kind of games. Whereas a highly narrative driven single player experience, even if experienced in a co-op way, some of the single biggest games this year are still under that ban, just Jedi Survivor and
Resident Evil
and Baldur's Gate, Alan Wake. Yeah, like so I don't, this is one of those, like, it's been claimed to be on its deathbed, and maybe a very, like, I haven't obviously run any kind of analysis on titles shipped and then sort of cross-referenced with their relative success and that sort of thing. Maybe it is true that it's on a downward spiral, but just a few keep reliably making the news. Like,
I don't think it is. I think I again, same. This is conjecture, but I think that there's too much player demand for it. I think that there are suits who would love for single player games to die and for live service to replace all of them, but truth is that's what gamers like. And that's why NFTs aren't appealing to gamers. Is like I think that people who play video games really, a lot of them, not all of them obviously, really enjoy a single player experience. And there's no means to replace that with a live service game. And like as much as they might like them to die, they kind of can't, because that's what players like. Like the market is
So
repeatedly proving that.
that's true, but there is an economic issue here potentially that I think I to be clear, obviously I love single player games. It's all I make. I love single player games. I'm not. It's but in terms of like, it is harder to fund them for sure than it was, because
You don't have guaranteed income.
The business people. No, business people are not as excited by them as they are by live service or multiplayer. It's very telling that when you think about the big single player games now, a large number of them make their money in a different way than just straight up selling to the customer. So things like Game Pass, where you're incentivizing a subscription. Alan Wake might not be a multiplayer game, but it is built around a subscription-based pricing model, right? Is that in Game Pass, Alan Wake? Am I about to embarrass myself?
I actually don't know.
I'm probably embarrassing myself there, but it's definitely true of like Sony first party.
Wasn't it published by Epic?
Yeah, it's published by Epic.
I'm totally wrong then. Ignore me.
So not on Game Pass at launch, but still published by Epic, which is like, this is always my exception. I always want a list for this kind of stuff. Single player games will always survive when people are trying to get you onto their platform.
Which is the PlayStation model.
Exactly, the PlayStation Nintendo model. They make very, very, very good single player experiences, so you'll buy their hardware, so then they get the 30% cut of everything that you buy on the store or whatever else.
It is a popular genre, it's beloved by players, and there's an obvious massive audience who want it, but they only pay once. So therefore there is a ceiling on what the money can be, unless you are selling a platform.
Yeah, and I guess when people are inventing other means to monetize, like live service games, it's very difficult for people to go, well, let's do that. I mean, everybody wants to be FIFA Ultimate Team. I said it before, I'll say it again. It's the most appealing thing in the world for everybody to be like, make that thing which nobody can replicate. We're all screwed at the arrow goes up of FIFA Ultimate Team. But as much as we could talk about this forever, I love this kind of conversation, I did want to give a shout out to a very good single player game. This is in my top 5 games of the year that I really wanted to give a shout out to, just because I haven't seen it nominated in a bunch of outlets. It's called Dredge. It's not unheard of. It is an indie fishing game made by
it's Lovecraftian, right?
Yes.
It's kind of horror.
Made by a New Zealand studio, where it's better if I sort of don't tell you anything. Where just the more that you play this sweet little coastal indie fishing game made by a New Zealand team, things get creepier and creepier. And you sell and buy equipment and you catch fish, and it's got a unexpectedly engrossing story, a really sharp gameplay, beautiful art style. So I wanted to list that as my pick of like, while I think Baldur's Gate 3 will definitely win Game of the Year, and I absolutely adore Alan Wake 2, and I have very positive things to say about RoboCop. Like, there have been a lot of great games this year.
RoboCop surprised a lot of people. Like, RoboCop is I'm
going to make a video about it that's going to get no views. But the game direction, you know how like, I don't think a lot of gamers necessarily know what the game direction award is, and I feel like the RoboCop's directing is so fucking good. So I also love that. But
just in terms of its like consistency and how it comes together.
The way that the tone of that game, from gameplay to dialogue to performance,
the curation of the experience, it all comes together. Yeah.
And I feel like I haven't seen a game do direction quite that well, especially when it's got a sense of humor. Since every Yakuza game. Like, they're so well directed. It's so impressive.
Sidebar, licenses are really helpful for directors. They're an amazing North Star. They really do help guide you. And, you know,
I think that studio's only made licensed games, actually. They've only done like 80s.
I'm not diminishing it, but I definitely, being able to like point to, in my case, Tron, and be like, that's what we're going for, everyone. You know, it's definitely a nice shorthand.
For sure. Yeah.
It certainly was helpful working on Aliens, to have a list of do's and don'ts.
Can I nominate Austin's headshot noise as my game of the decade? In the Aliens game, that twang every single time you get a headshot just made that game. It's beautiful.
I still to this day do not remember who actually came up with that, or what.
You, Austin. It was you. was your vision.
Well, that's the thing. I'm so hesitant to take credit for it because I'm like, I don't
Am I a
remember.
genius?
Am I a genius?
Did I
Some
do that?
say
Well, no,
a modern day Mozart.
It wasn't
Binary
fact
Beethoven,
of,
that's what they say.
the fact of having a headshot noise was for sure not my idea. The question was where the actual sound came from. But that was the notion of there being a headshot noise. I definitely didn't come up with that. I just don't remember because it sounds so much like some of the brass things that we recorded for the score. But I just can't remember because it's already now like perfect example of like I signed on to that game before Disney bought Fox.
Wow.
Because I was hired by Fox people and then shipped a game with Disney
That's
people.
so weird.
So like to give a sense of the timeline, it was like 2018 or something like that when I was hired. So it feels like ages ago now. But Dredge, I keep hearing about Dredge and I swore I had bought it and I apparently hadn't. So it's
Highly
not
recommend it.
downloading
Yeah,
in
that's
my
I wanted to give it as my Play Watch List and nomination game of the year. Just as one that I highly recommend. Which related to either of you two, you can give me a game, movie, book, TV show. Nominate a thing of the year. The official Play Watch Listen Awards. I'll send them an email.
You've
You've
been nominated. I mean, I'm trying to think in terms of broader medium. This is hardly a deep cut, but I was really impressed with Oppenheimer as a film. I saw it when they brought it back into theaters for a week for the 70 millimeter IMAX showings, and I was just so blown away that on that scale of filmmaking,
We didn't have a
somebody was-
conversation about it, did we? I don't think we
Austin.
recorded after that. I also loved Oppenheimer. And I want to watch it again because I think I'm ready to finally.
You need to read the script, Alanah.
I do love reading a script.
It's written in first person, which is just such an interesting formal
Really?
weirdness.
I've read the whole Dark Knight script, and it's a really good read. I have that as a book downstairs. That movie's just edited so fast that I think the first time that I watched it, I had whiplash for the first maybe 20 minutes because like, oh my god, it's a new scene again. It's just so quick until it's not. In a way that I think works so well for the discomfort of the era that like you're just everything is constantly moving. You, because it's edited so fast, become a part of the race. Like it's just it's a really
feels like memory as well. Feels like how your brain jumps around.
Totally, it's a very impressive movie.
Feels very subjective.
The ambition and the $100 million price tag to make a movie that on paper, like this is in a way apropos the kind of single player versus games of service. That's a game that the pitch likely did not, other than the Christopher Nolan-ness of it and he just being his own draw.
That's the only reason it got greenlit.
That was my main thought when I read the screenplay is like how like nobody with any other name could have gotten anyone to read this past the 10th page because you're reading it and like unless you've seen the movie it's gibberish like it doesn't like and also, the structure of it's amazing.
And also just the pitch of we want to make a film about Oppenheimer that kind of is one foot in the kind of arms race science-y component of what the Manhattan Project was, and is another component in this kind of psychological anguish of being involved in the Manhattan Project.
A lot of communism in that film.
And
a lot of talk of communism.
Finally, Nolan's going to make a movie about like a nerd that no one understands who doesn't get to see his family enough. That's the dream. Finally that's possible. That's happening.
All that said, I'm pretty certain that when I finally see Maestro, it will decimate everything for me of this year in terms of the year's games.
I'm not familiar. What's Maestro?
Are you fucking with me? I can't tell. Sometimes coy Mike is indifferentiable from earnest Mike.
No, I genuinely sorry. Apologies. I have no idea what Maestro is.
Maestro is the film about Leonard Bernstein with Bradley Cooper that's just come out on Netflix.
Oh, I saw. I remember seeing. I remember people talking about the makeup because he's got a fake nose, hasn't he?
He looks exactly like Bernstein. Yeah, people made a hang up of it, and then
go to a museum, me and you, about Bernstein at some point. Yeah,
and we went to the Skirball to see their Henson exhibit, and they, by dumb luck, had a Bernstein exhibit while we were there, and I freaked out. Yeah, I mean, like, I've got a painting of him right here that Angela made, and my friend Andrea gave me this
Alanah
photo
was like me in a Lego
from
shop.
a gallery.
It was amazing. He had such a good time. It was lovely.
Everyone who has seen it that I've talked to so far has been over the moon about it.
It came out last month or
like
a week
last
ago?
week. Yeah.
That is last month,
Hero
technically.
yours, right? Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah, true. Fair. But that
is it one that you're saving? Are you saving it for like I need to?
No,
see
I've
this
just been
exactly
busy.
right?
We're like moving house and stuff, and there's been shit, and I was traveling, and so it's like I'm terrified that it's going to leave the theater before I have the chance to see it because it's been a hectic.
I didn't even know it
weeks
was in theaters. I thought it was just on Netflix. It's on both. They did an Irishman.
Any film that Netflix has Oscar ambitions for, they will.
I was going to say it's for the awards, right? They have to put it in there for a little while.
Yeah,
but everyone is saying like Bradley Cooper should be a complete shoe-in for director on this, and Carey Mulligan as well for playing Felicia Montealegre.
So Austin's nomination for Thing of the Year is a movie he hasn't seen.
I'm just sure, but I will say I know that I'm slotting right into a very mainstream opinion, but if nothing else, by kind of evaluation of putting my time / money where my mouth is, no game can come close to the number of hours for me as Baldur's Gate 3. I've played that game like north of 110, 120 hours, and it's like the second place contender for that for me this year is like 30.
Yeah.
Like to beat Jedi Survivor.
And the
or
thing
like
about
that, so.
Baldur's Gate 3, I was streaming it at first and then stopped because I was so fucking bad at it. And streaming it, like, if you're bad at something makes it worse. I had the same problem with Alan Wake 2, where it's like, I shouldn't be streaming this. I don't pay attention to the right things. I had thought a mechanic was far more complicated than it actually was. Baldur's Gate 3 is like one of those games that even though we're talking about loving 10-hour experiences, I never want to stop playing. It's very difficult to put down because you're always intertwined in like 3 very compelling subplots at once, and the minute one is about to be let go, another one shows up. It's like Mike, I'm sure you actually also have this too. I was going to say it's like when you're writing and you're like very much on a roll, but you have to go to bed and you're like, oh, I really don't want to finish doing this. I really don't want to put this down. I get that exact same excited, fuck yeah, this is awesome feeling from Baldur's Gate 3 every time I touch it. You're
getting a flow state playing Baldur's Gate. That's amazing. Yeah.
Cool. And to the kind of, in a sense, to wrap it back to the whole question of sustainability of big teams and where the conversation started. It's only very, very peripherally related to that, but just the idea that one of the things that makes unsustainable massive games is the fact that attrition rate of people coming and going, where if you have this ship of Theseus problem where the people that are shipping the game are so massively different from those who started it, that's just going to take a toll. And something I found very charming, I was in Ghent in Belgium for an event a month and a half ago or whatever, which happens to be where Larian is based, and a bunch of Larian folks came to this event that I was at this kind of after party thing, and I was talking to a few of them, and I don't think you'll find people more excited about Baldur's Gate 3 on the planet than Larian like employee. I said to them, I was like, okay, so I'm in the third act, and I walk into this what I thought was an abandoned store because I just figured there might be some basic loot I can sell or whatever. And it's like a coffin it's like a coffin maker. And I said, I have a perception check reveal that there's a movable bookcase. And I thought, oh, there's probably a hidden room. And I'm about to stop playing because it's late and blah, blah, blah. And I could see them, they were frothing at the mouth knowing where this story is going. Because, of course, you move the thing, you go back, and there's like 10 hours more content on the other side of this completely innocuous bookcase that you could easily have skipped. But it's not just fluffy random crap. There's like consequential, interesting stuff back there. And they, of course, they knew exactly what I was talking about, and they were so excited, and they were like, "Oh, how cool! Who was in your party?" And they were just so wired by it, and it was like I find that people that don't feel like they're just kind of serving their time at the company, but they're so bought in what they're making. And these were not like the art director and this was like a junior, animation person, or like like these. In other words, these were folks that, in the grand scheme of the company, were not major decision makers, but they felt so invested. They clearly were making an impact, and they felt like they were part of it, and because they obviously were. They obviously were, despite a lack of seniority, deeply impactful to the success of the game creatively.
I wonder if it's also
senses.
one of those ones where the game's so big that even in development, you wouldn't have necessarily seen everything that
I'm
players
sure
are seeing, and that's got to be so cool, right? Like, I don't think there was any part of Ragnarok that I wasn't aware of, but like a game like Baldur's Gate 3 is so. I'm sure the team was playing. Obviously, it was on early access, so it's had 1,000 play hours before it even came out, like thousands and thousands.
I can say I've borne witness to this very recently. I'm only sort of just now able to talk about this, but the new Lego Fortnite that just got announced, I scored.
Oh, cool!
And
nice. You and Eminem, right?
Yeah, we buddied up. No, I did work with another composer. They brought in two of us to hack through it. Chuck Myers, who was one of the Hogwarts Legacy composers, was also part of the team. And that game, when they broadened it, when the internal playtesting at Epic sort of broadened, and they were, getting a sense of how the systems are working. And, the game, one of the, apropos Legos, one of the things it prides itself on is a pretty robust kind of procedural physics potential, where you can really just kind of build whatever, and systems are capable of being created that no one can predict. And so there were these moments where people would try things that the core design team had never thought of, like just other people internal to Epic would do a thing and give them that first taste of, oh my God, I never even thought to do that. And just like the giddy childlike joy that was spreading throughout the team internally, of people going, oh man, you can do this. And oh wow, I never thought of if you combine this and that. So yeah, to see people work on a thing unaware of even its full potential, that to me, that's one of the coolest things about games that makes it totally different as a medium from film and TV, because it's rare, unless your job is like, oh, I come in and I'm part of the construction crew on a set. Like, those people likely haven't read the full script and don't really care, that their job is very specific and they're going to come in and do it. And by the time they're shooting that scene, they're probably building another set on an unrelated production sort of thing.
Yeah, like imagine working on Tears of the Kingdom. Right? And just being like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that. Yeah. Like watching players make something that you couldn't even comprehend. And like Baldur's Gate 3, obviously you're not doing that, but I feel like there are so many permutations. They just had an update where they added another like 1,000 lines.
Can't even imagine how many are already in there.
It's
at this
nuts,
point. I mean,
dude.
it's like a million lines of dialogue. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers.
So impressive.
Yeah, that's one of those funny things that actually, being a composer, I have an atypical bird's eye view, because the work will span the whole game. So the most common is, like, our disadvantage is we trade width for depth. Sometimes the full extent of what's possible in a game is hard to fully comprehend, but there won't be big chunks of it that I'm unaware of. Now, of course, the goal is to have maximum amounts of both and just play test the crap out of it while you're working on it. And that's where having multiple years helps. But yeah, like, it will be fun to talk to level designers where they're not really aware of the full extent of what's going on with other level designers, because they've got plenty to do just focusing on their sort of portion of the.
Exactly.
I mean, actually, Syndicate has a good example of, once again, I remember it was the Singapore studio of Ubisoft that did. There's like a flash forward in that game that goes to World War II, where you play Evie Fry's daughter, and that was like a whole other studio on a different part of the world. And so I remember when the folks in Canada got, like, when that, those assets like became visible in the build and stuff, everyone was like, "Holy shit, this is amazing! Like, what have they been doing down there?" Like, it was cool.
I feel like
that.
that's like my whole job, though. Like,
Yeah.
is I do something and then somebody else makes it cooler. I think I do that every week, and have for the last 3 years. I go, holy fuck, that like somebody made something and I could see it. That's probably a pretty big part of game dev. But I guess in that instance, what they received was done. Like it was actually finished, whereas most of the time it's incremental, right? It's definitely a very cool part of the job, though. It's like just being blown away by people making cool
Those
shit.
big jump forwards as well, those sudden moments where just a bunch of stuff gets dropped in.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Art, amazing. Incredible. How do they do it? It's the best. So I think
So
Austin has nominated Oppenheimer there as our things we like.
I said preemptively Maestro.
Thing you haven't
for
seen,
sure, Oppenheimer blew me away. Yeah,
I'm very excited to see the new Ghibli movie. I'm going to nominate that too. Thing I haven't seen.
Oh yeah, that looks great.
Seeing it next week. Mike, what is your thing you liked this year? Play, Watch, Listen Awards 2023.
I've not played enough games. Like,
again, I knew this would be the problem when I texted Troy and was like,
yeah.
if you happen to be free, he did say he was traveling for this episode. I was like, no pressure. They're not going to have played anything. It's fine.
I've played like 4 games this year tops. Like I like Spider-Man 2. I thought that was very good. I've always been incredibly impressed by that studio. So I'd go for like a movie or a TV show, I think. Watch a lot of
Season
TV.
3 of Never Have I Ever.
I've never seen Never Have I Ever. Give me the synopsis in 2 sentences. What's Never Have I Ever?
It's teenage girl coming of age story, but very specifically through Indian American perspective. A friend of mine was like, "You got to watch this," and I was like, "I don't think I'm the audience for this." And then I am super unapologetic about the fact that show is addicting and really charming, and was like, "You know what? Fuck it. I don't give a shit. It's really like all power to him." And Janina Gavankar, our Freddy in Stray Gods, had a random bit part in an episode, and I was like, yes.
She's one of those people that every time she shows up, I do the meme.
Yeah.
Like she's in Alan Wake 2, and I was like, where'd she come from?
I'll tell you what I really liked that I don't think enough people watch was Poker Face. I don't think that one crossed over much.
I don't even know what that is.
No. I think in America it's on Peacock, which is probably why no one's seen it. It's Ryan Johnson writing and directing a Columbo-style detective show, but the gimmick is the gimmick of the character is that the main character has a perfectly tuned bullshit detector, so she can't be lied to. So every case hinges on working out a way to make that interesting. And then structurally, it's very cool that it's the Columbo thing. If you see the crime committed, and then she shows up, so it's not who done it; it's how's she going to catch them. That's genuinely good, and it's also got like a serialized narrative. It's just a really good, very like perfect combination of like episodic detective show and serialized TV, and great cast and just phenomenally good. And then movie-wise, the creator I really admired, like just from a production point of view. Like I don't know if you two have seen that, the sci-fi movie.
Yet. Gareth Edwards.
No, it actually didn't appeal to me. The creator, I thought like I didn't watch it because I thought it looked quite generic.
It's definitely like the visual style of it is 100% every 3D artist portfolio I've looked at in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Like it's got that look to it. But no, I've been a fan of his since like Monsters, like the stuff he's done in terms of kind of guerrilla sci-fi filmmaking is really like, I don't know if you saw Monsters, but that was literally he shot. So he basically it's a movie about the quarantine zone around a kaiju have happened, and there's a quarantine zone around the area that they've emerged, and a guy's sent in to save a woman. It's a love story about the two of them on a road trip getting to know each other while the world is ending around them.
Love that.
But it was shot incredibly cheaply by filming on the American-Mexican border. So all of the like border control stuff that was already in place for that, they kind of CG in kind of monster signage and story. A lot of using real people as actors doing kind of start like documentary. It kind of starts to get towards kind of Nathan Fielder stuff, even like but like it's fascinating. And the creator's similar. The creator is just an incredibly tightly produced movie, very small budget comparatively, and just really excellent use of CG, like visual effects work. Like there's a lot of bad VFX now because of the way VFX companies are treated often, and things can go wrong, and people don't have the time they need to do things, etc. But that's a very clearly a film directed by a VFX guy, because every shot is chosen very carefully. Everything is playing to the strengths of what he knows he can get done. And as someone who similarly works in that kind of end of the budget spectrum,
budget's only
it's very
500,000. That's crazy.
It was literally, as far as I know, it was, and I'm sure these things are always exaggerated. It was literally like him in a car with a digital video camera.
I love that.
Two actors.
What people can make with limitations is always so much more interesting than what you can make with an.
You should watch. It's probably, I would say Monsters is more.
Doesn't have great reviews.
Probably. Yeah, it's probably true of the creator as well. They're not as good movies as they are just incredibly impressive exercises in how to.
Oh yeah,
make
I'm down
stuff
for that. Yeah.
Reasonably, I would watch Monsters. It's not excellent. I've not watched it in years, so it might have aged terribly. But like it's I like my process. I like my
yeah, totally.
I like seeing people working with limitations like that. It's really cool. And then The Curse, if no one's watched that, which is just breaking my brain every week at the moment. Have you seen that? I don't know if I like it or not. It's Nathan Fielder and
Emma Stone.
Oh my god, I'm a nerd. So Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, Emma Stone. I've seen
Emma
it
Stone,
advertised.
Yeah, it's really anxiety-inducing.
That's his whole thing.
I think it's
isn't
a comedy, but it's like more so than like his other stuff. I think I like it. But I do always get in a bad mood watching it. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Lovely. I have to run. Got a doctor's appointment.
We didn't mention an obvious one, but because it's been a while now, but the fucking audacity of the sequel to the Spider-Verse was unbelievable. Like that film I hope is not forgotten.
Yeah,
when
true.
The Oscars roll out, because God, I just watched it a second time recently, and I was like,
I also love the Ninja Turtles movie this year.
That was surprisingly
Still need to
great.
see that.
Way better than I
Still need to see
expected.
that.
I expected to just be a Spider-Verse clone, and it's not. It's really good.
Yeah, I that was one of those plain watches for me, because I was like, I'm sure this is not going to be good, and I was 100% into it. I was like, this is great.
Yeah, super fun. Yeah, but Spider-Verse is like on a level of its own. Both of them are. I actually still prefer the original, which I think is an unpopular opinion. But then
I think they're both so good that it's that level of excellence where you kind of forget how clever what you're seeing is. Like how it transcends visibly impressive.
They're virtually
into,
perfect.
Like, just
it's insane.
perfect.
They're such good.
The sequel, the way that the sequel so unapologetically would change everything about its aesthetic from one shot to the next in the middle of a scene, just for the sake of the 3 words that were going to be spoken in the new shot, and trying to capture them subjectively. I was like, this is a level of non-realistic filmmaking. It's an extreme that any other context people would have said, oh, it's this like super niche little art film, and the fact that they managed to squeeze it into a Spider-Man,
effectively the biggest movie IP ever, like Spider-Man, almost second to none. I really upset some film bros by saying that I think I would put those 2 movies in my top 50 best movies of all time. They were like, but The Godfather! Like, people really, really didn't like that, but I stand by it.
I was going to say, which movie about, like, a conflicted angry man would you push out that would upset the film nerds?
For a conflicted angry boy. Yeah, they definitely piss some people off there, but I just think, like, if I can ever make anything that's as good as one frame of either of those films, I'm good.
So incredible.
They're amazing.
They are just so no joke.
Okay, I have to run. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our annual really bad wrap-up of things we enjoyed this year. We did our best.
We tried.
All right, we'll see you next time.